Call the regular meeting to order. Public comment, non-agenda items, questions, comments that are not on the agenda. Okay.
I got my hand raised. Morning.
Morning, Meg.
Hi, guys.
Are
Thank
you
you.
public comment or are you?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So
I got
Meg,
my-
before we go through our conflict of interest, good to see
Okay.
you.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to zoom in. I want to give just a couple minutes on the update to the Big Sky governance study. As you know, it's underway. It started back in September. We had a really good sessions, three sessions in your building, in your room. And that's one reason for the call in today is thank you for letting us use your conference space for those public meetings. It worked out really well. We had over 50 people. We were presenting some existing conditions from all those meetings that we did in September. And we were starting to prep the community on scenario development, which is going to be a really great interactive session in January. The other thing I wanted to tell all of you is I'm in the middle of doing virtual meetings and some of you have signed up for them. They're office hours, half-hour sessions, and I'm asking questions, taking notes, and we'll fold those comments into the report that will come out in June. And you'll be happy to know that when I ask the question of how do you feel existing services are serving your community now, resoundingly, people are very pleased with the service of the Water and Sewer District. Thank you.
Thanks, Meg. Thanks, Meg. All right. About a conflict of interest around the horn. None. No, none. Peter?
None.
Okay, and none here. Great. Call the order and get right into the consent agenda. I always give you a rubber stamp, but talk to us about financials. I know we have a couple of big meetings coming up. Are you gathering some information?
Yes, well, we're a third through the fiscal year. Our operating expenses are right on target. Our operating revenues are slightly above, and that's due to the irrigation season. September quarter is always our biggest quarter because of that. So those revenues will smooth back out, and I expect them to come in just about where I estimated, which means our budget had a $2.5 million deficit in it. So we can expect that going forward, which means we're not, we were hoping, we talked earlier in the quarter about potentially raising rates in January. That was put on hold. We'll be doing, or we're continuing our rate study right now. But we've been warning you all along that there are going to be significant rate increases. In our operating budget today, like I said, we've got a $2.5 million deficit. Approximately 2 million of that is a non-cash expense depreciation, but it's an expense nonetheless that we have to fund to maintain our strong financial status. In 5 years, we're going to have an additional $2.4 million in debt service. So our rates are going to have to go up approximately $5 million between now and 2930. Right now, the sewer department is not in a position to take on any debt. It's going to be, I'd say, at least 5 years before the sewer department is in a position to take on additional debt based on what I'm looking at here. Just to stress where we're at. In 2004, when we finished the first plant we built, that was a $15 million plant, and we did it through general obligation bonds, so it didn't hit the rates. We're about to complete the new plant that we're working on, and The total cost on that is going to be approximately 60 million, 4 times what we spent. Back in 2004, we had approximately 3,200 customers. Today, we've got approximately 41. That is not a significant jump in our customer base to spread all those costs out. As a result, again, we are going to have significant rate increases on our customers. The board at our last meeting where we first brought the rates to the table for them to look at, we had Ryan come in and kind of walk us through it. We talked about, instead of trying to get our rates to the point where we can cover these expenses immediately, to spread it out over the 5-year period. So that'll give us a little more time to get there, but we are not in a position to borrow any money on the sewer side today or in the next 3 to 5 years based on where our rates are today. So,
Any other good news?
no. Well, the good news is that, 2 million of our expenses are non-cash expenses, so we're not going too far deep in the hole. With that, though, the bad news is we're not putting any money away to pay for the $60 million worth of plant that we just built. And one of the other items that we wanted to bring up too is besides the rates that we're working on and the fact that it's going to be significant rate increases on that side, we're going to be looking at our plant investment charges on both the water and sewer side, and I brought this up before. So expect those to change on the upside too. Any more you want me to lay into?
Probably enough for today.
Okay.
I think Terry's following up. If you weren't at the last meeting, or if you were, I'll wait with it. The very tail end, Terry shared the concerns. I mean, we had a 100% increase on the table for January. I've been having a 100% rate increase, and that's been over with me personally, and we've had 3 or 4 meetings on it. We've met, talked daily on it to say what's real here. We can't say the sky's falling. We can't be paralyzed by it. But a couple things that came out of it. Talked to Scott as well on a couple of these. It's this. It's not an option, and I'm so glad you're here, Dan, and to hear this. Debt is not an option for this board. In fact, we're in probably the toughest spot that the Big Sky Water and Sewer District's ever been in, with obligations and for the ratepayers, and you can hear it in those stats. And if you look back at the history, so when you hear us talk about we have to make tough decisions, these are going to be tough decisions. And we have, it's amazing to hear that's how few ratepayers we've added, but how much has gone into that plan. People have to remember as we talk about the plan, there's over $100 million invested in that over there, well over 100 million since on the ratepayers here. So, and what do the ratepayers have? Well, they have their asset, or the asset of the water and sewer district, basically SFEs. We all know that SFEs have tremendous value. In fact, I'm not going to say it's the engine for the community, but SFEs are the fuel for the community. They're the fuel, they're the growth for the community. And that's the asset. So I want to ask the board to do, and for those of you who attend every meeting, is just understand this. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our ratepayers first. And we've got a lot of negotiations going right now. We have subcommittee reports and a number of things going, and we have to put the ratepayers first. That's all there is to it. That's our job. We've doubled our staff, tripled our payroll to accommodate this new plan and to accommodate the future of Big Sky. But as we go down the path on, I don't care if they're annexations, if they're negotiations for anything we're doing, we have to make sure that this entity is covered. That's all. So just a reminder, and it's a follow-up because, yeah, he touched in urban. I said, there's got to be some mistake here. I got to tell you, there's not really a mistake there. That's where we're at as a community, but we got a heck of a plan, a heck of a team. And I hope the board supports the consultants like Scott and WGM as much as I personally do. And I think that we have to continue to get on that path, but we have to give them guardrails. We have to give them the needs and the limitations. It's one thing to say, yeah, just tell us what it's going to cost to build it. But if we don't have the financial means or the model to do it, not going to be able to. So as we negotiate these, just understand that this isn't about us as a board trying to just get more out of potential ratepayers. We've got to protect, and we have as I said, a responsibility to the current ratepayers that built that $100 million plan in this community. So that's your follow-up. We follow left it a little bit, but we can jump right into committee reports unless there's any questions on it. What are the next steps?
Need a motion.
We gotta approve the consent. agenda.
Oh, yeah.
So moved.
Yeah, question.
What are the next steps in trying to work this out? And
We've got a meeting internally on Thursday. Yeah, on Thursday with respect to the rates. On December 3rd, we're meeting with the committee, the board committee, to go through the rate proposals that we're going to put together, that we're putting together. And we'll bring it to the board, I suspect, in January.
Yeah, December or January,
Yep.
depends on what comes out of the subcommittee on December 3rd. So the plan is to have options and just kind of look at everything. Through the discussions, we brought some more ideas at the table, to bring to the table to look at. There was some inadvertent numbers put in that we've had to remove. So, redoing the CIP. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands when we talk about CIP, this is just the work that we're looking. Doesn't mean that it's funded, doesn't mean that it's going forward. We're just trying to get everything in alignment with all of our accomplishments, everything we're trying to do. We've got some parts of our system are 50 years old, so they're halfway through. Looking for efficiencies and things on what we can do to improve, to reduce water loss and just to help things. So we're trying to get our portion out. We got a brand new plant that, we need to start planning, you got deferred maintenance 5 to 10 years, what those numbers are going to look like. And we're doing it in today's dollars, trying to project what it's going to look like in tomorrow's dollars. So it's just a realignment. We've had significant inflationary costs over the last few years. We've seen 20 to 30% in cost risen in parts and chemicals and operations and stuff. So it's just, we're not the only ones going through it. Just about every utility in the country is going through it in one way or another. So we're in a little bit better shape. But also we've chosen not to have direct discharge. We're 100% reuse in everything that we do here. So we're top notch. And as I referred, we were big fish in a small pond, and now we're changing that narrative and we're going to a much bigger pond. And we're playing in the big leagues and setting precedents. So
a lot of those numbers were capital improvement plan, and then also like the Canyon district as well, that were kind of baked into that without any revenues associated with it. But we had a capital improvements. I think I'm on that committee. We've never met. So it seems to me like it's tough to include things in there that haven't been vetted or really talked through. So is that part of the process as well?
Yeah.
Good.
And I'm glad you said that, because it was going to be my next comment. Can we pass this? I just want to make sure I don't do that again. Yeah. So if we had a motion in a second.
I'm good, but I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
We just talked.
And Devin, it'd be great, because that's one of my first things I wanted to cover is capital improvements, because we have kind of a disconnect. No one's fault. It's just, this is coming at us. It's coming at Terry. So we'll cover that, maybe go into committee and we'll hit that topic as well. Right?
Just two comments. Who's on the committee? Finance, Al?
And you.
I thought.
Yeah. You too. And I just wanted to join it after last time to learn, but
Yeah.
I don't have to be a standing member, but.
Something we might keep in mind as we go forward with this is not necessarily talking about the expansion of the plant capacity, but the quality. That, we're going to get blowback from current ratepayers. Why are we paying for additional capacity. But I think what we can push is the quality of the product that's coming out of there is what you're paying. That we can keep the river clean.
I would say this on the ratepayers. I would hope that this board would say, look, we just finished a $60 million project. And it is unusual to jump right into the canyon because the canyon's going to trigger the plant expansion. We can't cover the canyon right now with our current plant capacity, correct? So that being said, the goal will be that it doesn't cost the ratepayer anything, and it shouldn't cost the ratepayer anything. And we can cover a little bit of it now, but I think when Nace gets on, I think there's a big picture to talk about after sitting through 2 meetings with the resort tax. And that's, we might have the cart before the horse in this situation. We're trying to back into a financial model that will suit the canyon, whereas the canyon may have to back into a model that suits us for the ratepayers. If you're doubling someone's 100% plus fees, it's going to be tough to go out and not recognize the headwinds that are going to go along with that in a vote, and have in there that, oh, by the way, what's coming at you is the canyon. So canyon's a wonderful cause. We just have to make sure that we structure this properly for the ratepayers.
For the existing,
Ratepayers.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of moving parts that came out of those 2 meetings. I mean, it was amazing that stall in customers should be a planning tool for you as you talk about, or this board as we approve rates, because if there was a stall, whether it's economic stall or it was the pandemic, and we have a lot in the pipeline, I think we should back end that so that we can pick up the ratepayers that are artificially in the pipeline. And maybe that'll take some relief out of the current ratepayers. So it's just, these are options that we just need to consider. Great conversation. I'm glad we're putting it out there transparent. Now, we haven't had a meeting and we haven't done this, and he's saying, we're probably putting you behind because of this.
Well, we're waiting for the rate study to get done, so we had better numbers when we went into the budget, so it's all streaming together. I think after this last meeting, I kind of just put the CIP and budget committee together because it's the same parties and both, so we'll get there.
Great. It's all good news. I mean, I think we're still proactive with this. We have options, we have choices, we have negotiations. We're in the dead center of these negotiations right now, whether it's the annexation, whether it's the canyon, whatever it is, we want to make sure we don't miss the boat with resort tax now after we learned a lot of this. So it's a good educational opportunity. Anything else? Got to follow the rules here. I'll call the question. All in favor?
No, I need a motion in a second.
Actually, we did have a motion in a second.
Oh, I didn't see.
Let's start from scratch. All right.
I move we approve the consent.
I thought we had a consent agenda. Okay. Second was,
I'll second.
okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously if Peter's on board.
Yep.
Nice.
All right. Let's hop into it. But it's always good to have Terry be able to give us an update, not just rubber stamp that. So last time we seemed to do it at the end of the meeting.
Yeah,
It's always good to do it again. All right. Al, Northwest Energy, you do have an update.
I do. Since our last meeting, Brian, as chair, executed the boundary line realignment or the change in modified COS application with the county. So that's, we assume at this point, Northwest Energy's received that, signed their side. That should be on the county's hands, and we're just going to need to facilitate that process.
It's a good step forward.
Wasn't a very challenging piece, just something we need to get our arms around. And that little bit of understanding the lease with search and rescue has pumped the brakes for a minute, but we got comfortable with that stuff.
Just a couple potholes there along the way. It's in.
And Susan's on, we did meet with search and rescue. They were on board, and I think we're putting together a lease renewal so we can realign all that stuff too, so.
We got all that done within the 2-year anniversary of the BSOA sitting in here on Christmas Eve.
Yes.
Great. Anything else on that, Al?
Nothing.
Okay, Jared is on the Gallatin, the Canyon Water and Sewer District Joint Committee. Al, you were out of town. Anything you want to add? I maybe just throw a couple things in there from the meeting.
Mason's coming.
It'd be great if you don't mind, since I was out of town.
So Mace will be presenting on it.
Yeah, he's coming in to give a little bit of an update. He texted and said he was.
I'll wait then to give my thoughts on the meeting, and Scott, maybe we can blend this all together just to provide clarity for everyone what's going on maybe on some of these topics. So we'll wait for Mace. Interesting, Flatiron Committee, actually grabbed you before we started, but I just want to, and I'll be brief on this one. The committees actually seem to have worked well, but there's been pause in the committees as you transition into the legal documents. So I think once we get into these legal documents, or I'm going to say your recommendations and so on, we hit another tier of this. You know, this is more the mechanical alley, you're banging out the Northwest Energy, but now we get into what's going to go into the SFE gallons-based agreement and what's going to go into the annexation. I've said it over and over and over in the annexation. There's going to be a lot of conditions because everyone's unique, and everyone, it's not just unique in a subjective nature, it's objective. Some have SFE, some don't. Some have gallons-based, some don't. Annexation goes here. So we've got to get this template laid out, and it's probably time to transition to having these as action items moving forward, just as we have, I believe we have an action item today. It's under old business, but I'm assuming Coal Smoke is looking for an action item to say, let's engage legal to start putting this into a document that we can start reviewing. So it's an action item from the board, transitions out of the committee. So on some of these topics. So Flatiron's the same thing. I got a feeling you've been just waiting to be able to say, all right, here we are. How's it going to work? And I think we can start working on these concurrently so that we're consistent with them, but they will be unique given the nature of them.
I believe, since I have everybody in the room, we're trying to get a committee meeting on the books after the first of the year, correct?
I mean, whenever we're ready, we'll let you decide when it's appropriate.
I think it's always been the same plan. Spanish Peaks was at the table last February in here saying, hey, look, we need to understand how this gallons-based agreement is going to work in the future with additional SFEs. A formula was put together. Legal counsel said, you have an obligation to gallons-based. So it's not as if it's going to be subjective in that nature. It's how you implement the gallon. Given the fact that they're under the same umbrella agreement, correct? We've got to at least use a similar template for these two so that we can work forward on it. So I think it's not lost time for Flatiron. I think there's progress, but it just happens to be on another agreement right now. But hopefully that'll expedite the process. It's not as if we've ignored it, but it's time to take this up to the next board decision on how we're going to handle this. All right. Any other questions on Flatiron or anything? Okay. Compliance Committee.
We have Kate. You want to give the update on our pilot?
Yeah, I can do that. So for the salinity reduction plan, and like moving forward with looking into ways we can reduce salinity and that influence the wastewater plant and in our reuse water, we're beginning a series of pilot studies to kind of identify the problem and see if we're able to find solutions to reduce scale in larger developments without adding salinity to the system. So right now we're working on a pilot study that Peter Manka is involved in with Aquametrics at Lone Mountain Land's employee housing, Powder Lake, just down the road here. So we're using a TAC system with an electrodialysis attachment to which basically tells you that it's working, and it's the TAC stands for template assisted crystallization. So it's an alternative water softener that doesn't add any salt and reconfigures the structure of the water as it goes through the pipes in the building so that it's less likely to deposit onto surfaces. we are working with the Aquametrics who installed the system because we've had a couple issues with it where it leaked in the building, unfortunately, due to the fittings being installed. They were some brass fittings with flat PVC pipes, and that has caused some hairline cracks that involve, caused a leak in the system. And we want to, we talked to Aquametrics and they took full responsibility. So we want to give the opportunity to really see this through and see if it truly does work or not. And they have offered to cover the bill through their insurance fully and to pay to get pipes replaced with copper pipes so that this problem doesn't happen again and Lone Mountain Land doesn't need to deal with it. So we're moving forward with making sure that's okay with everyone on board, and then next week or so we should be able to replace the copper pipes. We're looking into doing similar pilot studies in other facilities, talking with Boyne Resorts, and yeah, we're hoping to, find a way to hopefully just through education be able to reduce this problem in the community.
And by other pilots, we mean other systems, other water softening systems. So we're working with partners in the system. And of course, when we mention, board members, we have subcommittees and board members. So I don't know, Peter, are on the compliance. But AE2S is running and overseeing the pilot. So it's third party. And when we get all done, we'll and have recommendations on, what the district sees would be good solutions to help us do that. We've done baseline on our well water coming in. And we take samples at the influent of the wastewater plant, so we can see what's being added to the system and then what we can do to help, reduce what old water softeners might do and stuff, what high efficiency ones might look like, and other technologies that are out there. So great.
What do we think the timetable is before we can assess whether the system is effective or not?
We
Is this
just
a couple
got
months?
those. We just put in those heater elements.
The plan is 6 months.
6 months, okay.
Yeah, the plan is so I'm doing monthly observations and compiling all of those. And we only have 2 so far, but we're, every month there's one more. And then we just replaced the heating elements. So from today, it'll be about 6 months for the first one. So that's what we think it'll take to really realistically be able to see scale accumulation. This is solely looking at the problem of salt-based water softeners adding salinity to the system. There's a ton of other like regular household things that add it, like detergents are big, stuff like that. So we're also have done a bunch of research using the data that the district has been collecting on just the rate of increase and how that might be reduced. And we want to go the educational route, just let the ratepayers know what they can do in their own homes to reduce this. And yeah, just rather than going with anything more drastic. The big threat would be if this continued to increase to a very high level and became a worst case scenario, we would have to do desalination or some version of treatment. That would be farther down the line, but we're not looking into doing that seriously. We're just trying to state that would be the worst case scenario and really want to avoid it. So it's to bolster the importance of smaller scale solutions.
Would be in a good position to make recommendations or restrictions. Yeah. Great. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Important, thanks. All right. You guys should be kind of wrapping up policy and benefits committee here. I mean, it's been a transition. Talking to Johnny yesterday, you had your last hire.
Their last 2 are sitting over there.
Make the introduction. Okay. Peter?
I'd like to introduce our 2 newest members, Eric Hodges over here, or excuse me. Jeb Hodges over here started in September 9th, and Eric Porter here started Monday. Right now we'll have a team of 3 operators and an assistant, and I look forward to really moving forward. And there's a lot of stuff with C&D moving forward. So hopefully these guys will continue to just move forward, and I really look forward to it, having a team.
So welcome. Thank you. Thanks. Excited to be here.
Yeah, subcommittee meeting, we're gonna piggyback off of our meeting December 3rd, since it's the same people, so we've got everything except for the training manual, which will be ready for December, so this all come for adoption in front of the board in December for January 1st implementation. The safety manual and all that stuff, we just met with staff, so it's been a lot of work and a lot of updates and progress and stuff. But I think we've gotten to a point where now we can move forward. So with the safety manual, a safety committee will be formed, and they're going to be tasked with reviewing the safety manual, making sure that everything's fit, because the last 6 months I've only been the only one working on all that stuff. And then, gearing up and getting everything in place for safety training and safety implementation and stuff. So everybody so far is looking forward to what we're bringing to the table and move that forward. So great.
Good. Well done to be that far along. It's amazing when you look back at the last year. So how did we get by in the past? All right. CIP development, just said, it'd be great to activate that and get it kind of going. And I learned a little bit last round, you had some CIP issues, and with the resort tax talking about it, the booster station, this and that. And I think the big shift was clarifying how the plan expansion is going to work for these potential commitments or potential opportunities, whether it's the canyon, whether it's Firelight, whether it's other applications. So that seems to be first and foremost now to say, all right, we're going to finance this thing. If we're going to do it, and how is it going to work? It's all about that, again, back to the ratepayers and the financial burden. So time to dovetail. Okay, business action items. Well, it says no action items, but like I said, we'll probably take an action item too today. So, and we're still kind of waiting on first. We can go to Scott.
Yeah.
Always good to see you, Scott.
We're trying something different with our letter. Johnny's suggestion was more of a grid, just easier to keep track of. So it's in the back of the letter now, and hopefully we'll do less writing in the coming months. And we have a meeting after today's meeting to go through all of our projects with Johnny and Terry and figure out what we can slow down, what we need to keep working on, what we can park, given the current financial status. We'll get into a little bit more of that here in a minute, but
Let's give them some good news. Let's
we
open up
have
with
a 2 megawatt generator that's on the highway in Wisconsin, headed this way, finally, after 2.5 years. Should be here by the end of the week.
Gotta help you if you need one fast.
Yeah.
If it gets here, we're setting it next week and starting it up the first part of December. So.
Yep, you will probably all feel it when it starts up. Yeah. I don't want to steal Adam's thunder. He's leading the startup of the digesters and the EQ basin, which are close to being fully commissioned. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah,
What you're seeing from your side of the fence, but
it's going good. Slowly but surely we'll get there. Yeah, just been working a lot with our integrator, trying to get all these pieces of equipment, electronics online and understanding how they work, and it's going good.
so once we have that milestone 2 will be completed, and we're just be setting the generator and punch listing negotiations with RSCI now through the end of December. Just basically applying pressure to them on all the details being done before we let them out of there.
You mentioned in your last update, you're talking about flows and how lower than expected they were, and it sounded almost problematic. Are there any challenges that go with incredibly low flows. I mean,
It's very-
you know, we're always worried about going over.
It's very problematic. I don't know if it's appropriate to say record low flows, but
Pretty dang low. We need some more toilets flushing out there.
yeah.
So
The ponds are incredibly low. I mean, I've never seen those ponds that low.
the flows drop off low enough at night that it shuts off the plant, puts it in standby operation.
It's a nice one.
I think
Yeah.
it's a combination of dry period and just for whatever reason, nobody was traveling much this fall to Big Sky at least, but I've heard this in Livingston as well. Belgrade, Bozeman, like this region is just not seeing a lot of visitation maybe.
He can attribute it to that. I'm gonna attribute it to some major I&I we got.
I was just gonna say, it's gotta be,
Over this year.
let's take a bright side to this and say I&Is have been reduced dramatically.
Yeah, it is partially true. The food is, the waste strength is still pretty solid, barely solid. It's just,
Yeah.
there's not that much.
But that can be a challenge. Yeah. With low flows like that.
Yeah, so Adam and James and Zach have been trying to troubleshoot that, figure it out. There's 3 or 4 ideas on the table. Currently turning blowers on and off in the middle of the night rather than having them try to maintain a certain oxygen level in the tanks, just have them shut down and restart. So cyclical aeration, which is a thing, but not common in these continuous flow activated sludge plants. Also looking at blowing some of the air off into basin 3, getting smaller impellers for the blowers, which I think requires a lot of fine tuning and gearboxes that we may back off from. In the process of turning air on and off overnight, we found 2 motors that are bad in the blowers, so going through warranty claims on those. Anything else in startup?
It's enough for now.
Yeah, that was some good news.
Again, a shout out to everybody at the plant for putting up with this for going on 4 years now. It's been above and beyond what anybody would have expected or should have to put up with. And we still have the pond clean out. So we got a proposal from Synagro to do that last clean out of 2 all the way down to the liner and then replace the liner. We're going to talk about that after this meeting of whether or not we want to stick with that. That is being used for the budget with Glacier Bank for Terry's role on that loan, but whether or not we hire them, look at somebody else for this year, because you all have an extension basically to spend that money. Even though, you know, all the drawdown has to be done with the bank by November 30th, right?
December 1st, loan closes December 1st. And it's approximately 40 million, just over 40 million.
Yeah, you covered that.
Yeah, it needs to get done.
40
Yeah.
million.
Pontoon was used as emergency bypass throughout construction and needs to be cleaned out. So that gets us through the plant.
How about treatment levels? I mean, that was great news last time. Hearing those treatment levels were, Dick, you mentioned earlier. Got to make sure that when Jack isn't here, that the message gets out, that unless Jack's on, that these treatment levels are extraordinary. And they're above targets, I think, from what originally to be at this stage, to be this far along.
When Adam had sufficient waste strength coming into the
Yeah.
plant, they
Back where
were.
the flows, yeah.
They were. Now with waste strength being so low, it's a long story, but you oxygenate all that nitrogen, then you have to.
Working out winter operations now, which, just to explain, when water gets colder, it holds more oxygen, so. So we've got to disperse oxygen, for that reason, so it's the growing pains of new operations and getting everything figured out. You go through the modes of the season and you adjust and do that, not to mention you're also dealing with a bigger facility and now you're, instead of 80 or 90% of a plant's capacity, you're at 50 or 40, so you're operating at half of what you used to have, so it's a huge learning curve, plus working out all the gremlins in the new system and stuff, so.
Yeah, you're still in the middle of a construction project that slams the plant with
variability that you won't see long term. And
Yeah, the good news is, once we get the load increasing, once tourism activity picks up, we fine tune our hospital delivery, we'll be where we need to be.
Great.
Wastewater facility plan, we're putting that on hold, for the time being. There's not, there's not a lot of pressure on getting that done, so that's one thing with the park. Reuse management plans in good shape. Reuse booster station PER, there's an explanation of where we are in here, which I think we should spend a little time on. That's one where, if things were all hunky-dory, you would go get about a $7 million loan from SRF to do the project. We have been working on the permitting of the plan and working with Spanish Peaks and John Olson and Gallatin County on getting you that property. I think you should probably go ahead and get that piece of it done, but if you want to push that project off till another day, I don't see necessarily why you couldn't. You just won't have the full 160 million gallons of disposal up to Spanish Peaks and YC yet until you finish that project. 130-ish, which has sufficed to date. It was just eventually to realize that full 160 million gallons, you need to build that booster station. If you don't want to proceed, then we probably should shut down the DNRC and SRF plans, and we're on their intended use plan. We have monthly finance meetings with them, and we can just say, look, we're not in a position to do that right now, and park it. You give up on $750,000 grant from them, but $750,000 on $7 million is, it's not like the biggest prize on earth, right? It's not like you would have to stay in the project just for that. But something to think about. And I think it would be best if you had that conversation with Terry and Ryan on the, is it December 3rd subcommittee of finance. So Ryan can come out for that. He can come out for the board meeting next month too, or one or the other. And I think you all really should get into hard workshopping of whether or not you want to.
I think the December 3rd meeting would be a really good one for Ryan. And the big topic there is, and you had it on the capital improvements list for Resort Tech, correct? The booster. And I think what came out of that was, given everything we're talking about for expansion. So you basically have capacity of 130 million to satisfy the obligation right now. I looked at the last 2 years and I think it was 85 million.
Yeah, we're about 50%.
About 60% of the obligation. So when you think about this, I think eventually, yes, it's going to be a requirement, but it's also interwoven with the canyon plan and what would happen there, any, other things that would be disposal options. You brought up a good point, price for 1,000 gallons and things like that, but bottom line, it's there. We don't have the capacity. Do we have the capacity if we run 24/7? I know it's you're not going to do it 24/7.
We run 24/7, 365.
Got it. This is just so everybody understands. What you don't want to do is say, we don't have the capacity, and someone says, well, they run. We just want accurate information out there. Yes, you could do it 24/7.
You can't get to 160.
Yeah, but it's gonna take us all year.
It's just
And think of what you're doing, Mike, at that point, you're basically begging for a breakdown, and then you're really behind the 8 ball.
It's not the right thing to do. It's just curious if we can achieve it. But then secondly, I think there's like another part of the picture that we haven't fully, bettered yet, which is just where is the demand for all the wastewater long term? And I think we just got to figure that out, whether we're sending it all to the right, do they even want 160 million gallons? Who knows? But there's a lot more pieces of the puzzle, I think, before we spend $7.5 million.
And it's going to come up again. We can get Mace here. Is the idea of the canyon, and I would suggest everyone look at the interlocal agreement before the next meeting. Okay, maybe you distribute that out. The second amendment to it. When you talk about what's going on and what's been discussed verbally and what was anticipated. I know originally there was talk of a 2-to-1 ratio, whatever it is today. We got to look at that ratio because you had a great point. The efficiency of gravity feed in the canyon, if it does go that direction versus being pumped up, and the costs associated with it would be something to be considered and factored into this booster station as well. So a lot of moving parts, but it's all about funding.
I can tell you long-term, you need that 160. You need all of it. You need them to take it for you, and they are, I mean, the snowmaking they're building is really to enable them to best manage that 160. Provides best use of that water, so ultimately you need to do that project. The timing of it is, the pressure was more about not having any sort of redundant downtime, which in the past few years you've needed. Whether it's a duct in the intake,
Well, we found out why that was going on, so.
Can't be having the ducks in there, man.
The screen that covers the hole sticks up out of the water, so through levels and ice and stuff, it picked it up and moved the basket.
The riser?
Yeah, so we actually shared a new one that would actually bolt to and stay under the water line, so that couldn't happen in the future, so.
just things like that. So the other part of the project you need to continue with is switching out the pumps in YC1. Right, and that's happening.
Yeah, I've called Kirk today to go over the status of where those skids are at and working out the control scheme with Kirk and James, understanding the programming we need to do on that PLCs.
New run-of-the-mill pumps, more like factory floor availability versus what you had there for 20+ years. That's pretty exotic because of the pressures. So, and some pipe fitting that has to go with that. So it's not that you won't spend any money on, let's call it the reuse pipeline network. You can just essentially park the bulk of that 7 million for another day.
Do we want to direct him to pause or go in wrap up mode then, just so we,
I think we should,
yeah. And we hear you, we need this, it's everything right now is about priority and where we're gonna go. And maybe once we resolve the financial model for the canyon, we swing back to this. But at this point in time, the priority is expansion if we're going in that direction and how that financial model is gonna work on the rate payers.
So what I'd like to suggest is a partial pause. So we continue with the 402 exemption permit with Gallatin County and working with John Olson and Spanish Peaks on securing that land permitting, let's call it. Because we're in it with Gallatin County land and zoning. Go ahead and finish that. Just stop on, the progression towards final design.
I know what I said, a wrap up mode, so a wrap up pause. It's not really initiating anything new in it, but basically make sure that we don't waste anything that we've already did. All right?
That makes sense.
Okay. Canyon, so you were at the last workshop. I don't know if Mace is still coming in.
He said he was 30 minutes, so he should be walking through the door
Okay.
any minute.
Maybe we can give it, just
The Canyon,
tee it up for him because a lot happened since the meeting as well.
Hey, Scott, can I jump in?
please.
Thanks. We had a meeting, we've talked about the structure of what that looks like to be able to essentially operate, and I'm going to use the broad term, the construction projects as one project. It makes more sense to operate them as one project for all kinds of purposes other than making sure that how it gets paid for. And so Tara and I explored the joint authorities. We reached out to SRF. Anna had never used a joint authority. She was aware of them, but she didn't really have a preference. We're more comfortable because of the way the joint authority creates a whole nother structure that will continue on, that we don't think we particularly are going to need if this is the path we go. We're more comfortable with writing an interlocal agreement that addresses how, between the two entities, addresses how the construction projects will proceed forward. Tara sent me a draft Sunday night. I haven't gotten through it yet. And then we will need a separate interlocal between the two districts as to how billing works, how additional flow works, who makes those decisions and how they've got that. We have a structure of one between Gallatin Gateway and Four Corners that we have used for that. But in our mind, it's two separate interlocals between the two districts. Now I'll kick it back to Scott, who will be eloquent.
Thanks, Susan, and that may turn out to be the easier part of the project. The Canyon has signed the 60% scope and fee agreement with WGM and us as a sub. You all have signed your 60% design agreement with us as the prime, so we can go forward with the next stage of engineering. But that's gonna culminate with hiring a construction manager at risk to be part of the team to complete the project. I think the elephant in the room here is you all are feeling a little bit of frustration at how the financial model is being built, and want to make absolutely sure that in no way, shape, or form are Big Sky County Water and Sewer District ratepayers subsidizing that project. So we still have work to do on that financial model to make sure that that is not going to happen. And I think that should also be a big part of that December 3rd workshop. You'll spend part of the time on your finances, but then you'll have Ryan and I would put the screws down pretty good on explaining that model one more time, because it's complicated, right? It's not nearly as straightforward as you would think. There's a lot in there to understand before you would keep going with construction per se.
I think there's 2 points. There were 2 points that I came away with the other day that were key. First and foremost, you nailed it, as I said earlier. The ratepayers cannot put this on their shoulders, and they can't sign up for an obligation. And you missed the earlier part, but this is not that the water and sewer district may not want to do this. They don't have a choice. How many million?
2.5 million down and another 2.5 million in 5 years.
Just the 40, man,
5 million.
just the 40. Just tell me the 40. Now, it's a little deceiving because our friends at the resort tax take a lot of that pressure off over the next 5 years. But in 5 years, or in the next 5 years, or even the next 10 years, it's not a question of the district won't, it can't assume the debt we're talking about in some ways. So this is the two-pronged approach. Number one, that plan expansion, how's it going to work? Because that's just not an option. So, and as I said earlier, the water and sewer district is the fuel for all these projects that people are talking about, is the fuel. So if that is recognized, and we can come up with a financial model that does not impact the ratepayers, great. And then the second part, you don't want to create a headwind by having inconsistencies with the canyon and the ratepayers we have. And one in particular was when we started doing the math on the PIC and what they would be dealing with. And we really emphasize the idea we've got to be able to talk apples to apples and oranges. We can't talk customers here, SFBs here. What it comes out to is 2250. That's the one. So you take that 2250 and you divide it out, and what would the PIC be on that, and what would this be based on an SFE? So we just need to speak the same language by the next meeting. That's the most important thing, is that it's consistent with the SFEs, because we're kind of saddled with flow-based agreements, and I think they can be complicated and subjective. So got to do those two things. That's the message, and I think the bigger message that came out of it, and it was a great meeting, was how important it is to come up with the financial model and the financing for this plan expansion. Now, you've said I was wrong in a couple of things when I say, correct me if I'm wrong, but the last meeting I said, hey, can we phase this? And you kind of said, no, you can't do it. I would highly recommend not to. Well, we got to look at every option we have out there, even if it's not financially the best thing, maybe it's the only thing that can happen. The trains and phasing of the trains or whatever. But we got to start thinking outside the box. And I hate to see you get too far down. I think you did a great job at the meeting the other day. I opened the meeting saying that support our consultants, you guys make it happen. But in this case, I just strongly suggest, it seems like it was a bit siloed, the financial model based around the canyon. It was what works for the canyon. you may want to start off and do a model that says what works for the district and not putting any economic pressure on the ratepayers. Because it creates a headwind for everything you're trying to do over there, Danny, when you start saying, wait a minute, we're doing this for the housing trust, or we're doing a planned expansion for more SFEs, as Kevin Germain said at the meeting. We said, you know, maybe we just have to push pause if the canyon can't go through. What about the housing trust? You want to make sure that you back into it from a ratepayer perspective. You're just not gonna be able to do that. It's gonna be a lose-lose to try to put that on them. So maybe back into that model and see if it's feasible for them. And that's all. Not speaking for the board, but it just seemed like a good starting point.
Just realized that I missed a lot of the tweets that was going on.
I'm trying to make you feel better. I'm gonna think about another thing.
Will we supplement or call again?
Again.
Yeah, so I don't know what I missed, but it was a jam-packed 2-ish hours. Lots of variables. How does it pencil for the canyon? How does it pencil for Big Sky? And I agree. We've been focusing on what is the end cost to, say, a Ramshorn user versus a new development user. And those costs are going to be different. And how do we figure out a model for the canyon? Now we're translating, what does that model translate to Big Sky? And my optimism for Big Sky is canyon is cost-effective disposal. And I think there's a tool there that helps your ratepayer base. I think increasing the $12 million ask to the 20 million we started to talk about from the 1% improves. The canyon purchasing treatment from Big Sky, near term, you got users that start paying bills sooner than later. And then the real, I guess my real optimism is working towards your phase 2. We acknowledge the canyon kicks you into phase 2, and that's a big commitment for your district. And I heard Brian loud and clear that why do we take our users that direction if that's not the right move? And that's a big decision point for the community, for Big Sky Water and Sewer District. It has to pencil, and the canyon pretty much pushes you to, you're doing phase 2, and that's a big commitment. My optimism on that is when we use these, whether it's the 1% or the 3% in resort tax in that user base, plus as we approach the county of tax increment funding, it's a big tool. It's $20 million scale. I used to be running that $10 million number. As we run the numbers of what that does in the canyon or with cold smoke, that's a powerful tool that if that's in play, I feel like we can get to where your user rates go down. I don't want to say that until somebody like Ryan Graff runs the numbers, but when I see that economic engine or that funding base climb, it gives me optimism that we can keep it on the tracks.
And I'd add one comment again. So it was a great meeting. It's a wake-up call meeting. But I want to be really clear because again, sitting next to Kevin, he had his opinions on it, and I agreed 100% on this. Look, this is a noble cause. Putting this closed system in a canyon is incredible. That is so important to explore that to the end. But it's just a question of sequence and the financial modeling. And if you're able to walk in and say, all right, plant expansion is going to be 25 million. This is how we're paying for it. And it's not going to cost. It's going to help everyone in this room with how you put this out to them. And I feel like we're getting into a little bit of a crunch time now because there was another meeting, Johnny, that we were in the PIC with the resort tax where we just said, hey, let's pull this booster station off the table. But maybe it's more important to say, we're going to pull the booster station off the request, but we're going to put in a financial model for the planned expansion to accommodate the canyon and that. We just have to have those answers. We wouldn't want to miss the boat with your December meeting and then you're adopting this and say, we'd only known that the district wouldn't do this unless they had the financing model in place. Now it's a time constraint. And it's put on this board and committee for capital improvement so we don't miss an opportunity to be at the top of the list. This is about making sure everyone in this room, resort tax, housing trust, understands the importance of having that model in place. And it's also about reminding everyone here the value of that plant over there because the SFEs are the gold. The fact that we can go out and take on something like a firelight, that's a big impact in the community. Not saying that it's any bigger than the canyon, but to be able to take something that could be a real problem for the community and great environmental cause, that's big. Or other projects that come in that we can help, gives us tremendous tool, but that's how valuable this entity is, just like everyone else is passionate about their entity. So, yeah, so it was a great job. I know I was tough and he was tough on me. He was like, "No, you can't do that."
Well, you kind of started it with the concrete. The issue is the building. That's what's needed next to complete phase two. And it's hard to build, a third of the building or a third of a control system or a third of the gates and valves. It's just really hard. I mean, we could maybe shave $1 million or $2 million or something like that, but it's just extremely hard to face. In those meetings, I think something that I take for granted that I realize not especially the public understands is that the phase one project was designed to accommodate all of your obligations, in-district obligations as of 2017, 2018, when we first started planning that project. The reason it's confusing is because now we're sitting here like, well, we don't have enough wastewater down there. We need more wastewater. And it's like, well, those 3 basins and that system that's down there now that's online is built to take all the obligations in the district that haven't shown up yet, haven't called their card in yet, and they will eventually. The canyon throws you over that into the phase 2 expansion needs. And that's one reason why those 3 additional basins were built. Things like that were, 15 years ago were unforeseeable. 10 years ago were unforeseeable. So I just want to make sure everybody understands when we're talking about, well, we don't have enough wastewater, we need more wastewater. Well, wait a second, that's too much. It puts us in the phase 2.
I think one of the bigger surprises for me was when we said, here we are, we're going to satisfy, I don't know how you're pulling the rabbit out of your hat on this, the 600, but you're doing it. We can satisfy every obligation in the book. Right?
Well, we did that through
But you did it.
the deviation that we put through. We've accounted for everything.
Everything is covered that you have, and that's a nice place to be. Our house is in order to the board. What I didn't realize, and we've heard all the way along, was the phase 2, correct me if I'm wrong, almost triples capacity. That's triple.
Well, triples your capacity from where you sit today on how many people are sending wastewater.
Right.
It doubles the capacity of this infrastructure because it's just flopping it over and doing mirror image.
So the key that we're getting at here is somewhere between 0 and 25 million. And the biggest fear I think that this board should have is looking back and learning from what we just completed and what those budgets were when I start looking at the first interlocal agreement, everything. I mean, it's inflationary pressure was off the rails. I'd hate to say, all right, let's get underway and lock in on fixed consideration on these upgrades. In other words, we're going to give you 1,000 SFEs and that's fixed. You get 1,000, but our plant doubles. Because that's kind of what happened here. We made a commitment. And it's a fixed commitment, but the budget, because of inflationary pressure, won't have done. So I don't want to contradict myself, but I'm saying this, we got to decide on what we're going to do and then do it. Because if we make these commitments and then we don't do it for 10 years, we know the expenses are going to be 2 to 3 times. That's at least what we're going to learn out of this. And we just don't want to be in that position where we're making commitments that have a life. And I think it's all great that we're having these conversations, not to dominate the meeting, but they used to be 4 hours, these meetings, and we've cut them down so much. I figured we better fill that time. That's it.
Hey, you ready for another one?
Hey, Dan, it's good. It's great.
Because I go in and say Scott originally said the number was $8 million for the plant expansion. That's how they.
Oh, no, it's 6.
I want to call Tom Reeves right now. I'm going to dial him up and ask him what I.
A couple of observations. One, when we started the plant expansion for the initial 1% ballot measure that went forward, we were right in this time frame. So yeah, well, there's a crunch. I believe we started our discussions in November of 2019, it would have been, and then got that vote to the ballot in May. Just a couple of comments on the phasing. You're talking about construction phasing. There's also, you know, a 3-year window here where the financial phasing may be part of the conversation as well. So as we're looking at, you know, 5 or 6, 7 projects that may be going to the ballot in May, just keep that in mind. One of the things that we will be looking at as well is we've got 2 years of debt service on the corner parcel that we're trying to juggle around as well. So, not all projects will necessarily need to be shovel ready, you know, shovel on the ground day one when that money gets secured. In fact, there may be an advantageous reason for the community to go after a first phase of bonds on the initial go around, because our capacity is based on a 5-year average of collections. And if you look back at how resort tax collections post-COVID occurred, you know, that 4th and 5th year is starting to become pretty critical in our overall average that we would run for the amount of capacity that we would have. So it increases our capacity to phase out some of the projects, maybe one of them in 25 in August, once our books have closed, go after a bond at that point, and then maybe another one in 26 or even 27. So I just throw that on the table. Beyond just construction phasing, we're also talking about financial phasing and how that math all plays out with everything that's being looked at right now, including the canyon and the cold smoke and other projects that are next.
That graph that, was it John Zork put together the other day? Extraordinary. I mean, man, knowing where your window is in your ceiling. Maybe for the next meeting of the capital improvements, we would have that as a part of our packet to see what their limitations are. And I think this, again, these are all good meetings because it's not too late. Yeah, and it's just more getting everybody up to speed on what the priorities are here for this board, what the priorities are with the consultants and yours. That was a great meeting. I wish I'd gone to one earlier. So
Tom used to try to pin me down. What's
okay, not the Tom.
Hang on.
Tom's not the chair anymore.
I just want to be sure.
Brian.
Pat, you're not here either. Okay?
He used to try to pin me down on what phase 2 would cost. And I used to throw out 15 million. And 15 million is every bit of 24 million in that inflation period that we've all watched here. That's been mind blowing. What we have to be extremely careful about how we talk about these prices, because what I think happened is we talked to the, you know, about the Canyon as what their cost share is of that 24 million, which is more like that kind of $8 million thing. So you just have to be so careful about what costs you're talking about, whether it's canyons or just the total project.
Yeah, and I think it's great because you just hit the nail on the head. The PIC is what a ratepayer is going to look at. A PIC in the district, and again, it's not your fault. It's you're kind of siloed. You're trying to keep both ends happy, and we're pretty easy going at the district until we get to this point. But if you're saying the PIC for some of the canyon is, and again, we have customers and SFEs and so on, is 3,000, and then you come in for a permit for someone that's annexing in to the district now, you're 6,200. Yes, don't have to be exactly 62. Then that's going to be a headwind for resort tax to say, you know, someone's going to say, why are they getting this and what's this? We just have to get our arms around how this can work and be consistent at the same time. That's all. And there's such value in the SFE. I know that Tom Reeves would shoot me on this one, but to say there's got to be a way to maybe monetize the SFE in a certain way where you could support the completion of phase 2. That's all. We just have to consider every model out there.
Yeah.
Because you gave us the all or nothing knows that, but it's working. The committees are working. And what came out of last week or the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks is that every time we kick the can and say no activity in the committee, I take responsibility. If we didn't meet, and then there's a surprise. That's it.
Yeah.
So.
It's hard. If it was easy, everybody would start a water and sewer district. I don't know if we want to open up this can of worms right now, but we got a response from DEQ Friday afternoon on the GPD per SFE deviation request. And I said, get this, they said, it's not our business. It's up to you on it. Which just.
It's in our hands. Is that good news or bad news? It's good.
Well, I think Ron's gonna want 3 months of his life back. When they took it, they put us over this for months, and we got through it, we got to the 107. Now we went back, gave them all the data, showed them why we think it should be 75, 80, 85 tops, and they said, we've looked at it, we've decided it's not our business, you can run it like City of Bozeman does. It's your business, but we want to see how you legally finance it. Bunch of easy stuff, relatively easy stuff. They want to see how you define an SFE.
Wow.
They want to see.
I figured it was good news, but I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Let's throw Johnny a bone because he's been preaching this on the gallons base for 6 months. You've been preaching that, yes, and I've been saying, I don't know, man, I don't know if we're gonna get below this 107. But this is good news. It's gonna help with these, closing out these agreements and annexation.
We haven't had but 60 seconds to talk about that email, but.
Yeah, we just got it the other day.
The thought is set it at give yourself a little bit of a safety factor above that 75.3 that data supports. And leave it, for 20 years. So we're not like, what is it? What is it? What is it? You had to get off the 107.
Wow. Which is really odd because from an old water use ordinance from 20 years ago, it had language in there for 83.
I thought I read one for like 135.
Might have been older than that, but
That might have included irrigation, like, raw water, total raw water side or sort of.
That's good news. It's gonna give us flexibility with the negotiations that are going on with the three.
I think it's a change in how DEQ is regulating in Montana, where they're admitting that they don't have the wherewithal to ride everybody and sweat the detail on every utility and agency. And so they're saying your business is your business as long as you, don't go out there and build way more than you have plant capacity to treat or reuse capacity to treat. So
What's the responsibility in the district? It does. For compliance.
okay. So the idea is to review this material, put together a technical memo that we'll bring back for review and adoption to move forward in the near future on how we deal with this stuff.
Say that again, Jim.
We're gonna put together a technical memo on the information that we got and bring that, so we have that kind of.
So you're coming in with a number.
So I'll report back to the canyon. You just gained 15% capacity. We're ready to go. Just kidding.
Keep it coming.
Water master plan, we'll talk about that after this meeting. We're on it. I think there was some confusion on our end about whether we're parking that for a while or not, too, in addition to wastewater. So we're seeing how we keep going.
That is funded. The water master plan.
Okay. Rate study is Ryan. Again, if you all want him out here on the 3rd or the 17th, just let me know or him know.
Yeah, bring him out. Put screws to him. He'll tell you differently because we've been putting the screws to him. Yeah.
Resort snowmaking, this tip Ted worked. Just got a notice this morning that BizRad wants to finish that up. Gave us a deadline of 10 days to edit that infrastructure deficiency report for the Gallatin County side. Madison County's been done for a few months.
That's the one which is yesterday from Jackson.
Yeah. So we'll get that done.
I think that's one reason why I brought that up earlier, Scott, just on, where is this treated water gonna go? And, we have a pipeline going up to YC Spanish Peaks. I just think the bigger picture as to where Canyon District, where we intend to take all this informs where we should put capital, for distributing that resource somewhere. And that's a game changer if that comes through.
Right.
That 10th district comes through. There's nothing going into the resort today other than Andesite Mountain. So I think it's just worthwhile to really focus on what that big picture looks like before we start allocating resources to one specific project.
Should have had Mike at the reuse management plan workshop. The short answer is you need every single one of those. You need 160 million gallons from Long Mountain Land. You need
Firelight, for example, you need snowmaking at the Big Sky Resort for ultimate build out of everything that everybody is doing here. It took us a while to get to that answer and it was somewhat shocking. But all of these are ultimately needed, but on like a 30-year time scale. Whether or not which one comes first is, that's the hard part and the fun part. Figuring out how the puzzle works, but you're absolutely right. But it makes the answer easy in that you're gonna want to go support or pursue all of these. It's just on what time scales and how the financial models work to manage.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yep.
I believe that's it. I think that's enough. Any questions?
Not for me, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mace, anything else? Came flying up here on icy roads, you're rolling, barely get your coat off.
It was slow and steady, but I think financial model is definitely the priority.
Yeah.
Rather than hearing my optimism, see the numbers, and Ryan Graff is seeing both sides of the table. So tracking that clearly. I get any questions relative to the actual project that you all have for me, like, or is it really what's the dollars and cents, and that's all we care about for now?
Another ratio, the other, and it's because Scott said it to me the other day, I said, Mike, I said almost exactly what you just said. I said, we gotta work on prioritizing this and we're gonna do this. And I think I quote said, yeah, it'll be a good backup plan when we need to replace the liners over here. And you said, no, you need everything. And then I said, well, why did we go from a 2-to-1 ratio discussion, which is there's nothing in the interlocal agreement that identifies the ratio. So the discussion early on was 2-to-1 ratio for disposal. And even if we don't use it, we need that opportunity for catastrophic failure, like a riser being pulled off in the middle of the winter, or we have to replace a pond liner. So it's not about trying to cut our best deal. It's about, we got to look at all the resources, and a 1-to-1 ratio is not attractive. 2-to-1 ratio is attractive. What's feasible is the key.
And
that makes sense to what you're saying as well. Let's have it in our back pocket. I hope we make snow with it, so we're not taking out its beneficial use.
What I'll generalize is on the near term, I feel good about 2-to-1, like that 10-year outlook. As you go long term, I think 1.5-to-1 and throttle that down. And I feel that will align with as Big Sky Water and Sewer District has more tools in its toolbox. You don't need that 2-to-1 to go down. So I think it's a win-win to some degree.
It's funny, I think we need on the back end versus the front end. As we get the surge in customers, we'll need maybe that ratio for something like a pond canyon, but.
So I think the canyon is gonna go develop every bit they can.
2250 on the SFEs?
No, on reuse.
On reuse.
Reuse and disposal, they'll go do whatever they can.
Got it.
And offer it. The issue is that all this is being negotiated right now, and we don't have any guarantees of what the canyon will be able to get down there. The main stem's been declared impaired, it's gonna be tied up for a while. So the 1-to-1 came from a timely negotiation standpoint, just get the 1-to-1. And then anything the canyon develops beyond 1-to-1, they can essentially sell to you. To me, it simplifies this whole negotiation process because it doesn't set you up to say, well, we fought 2-to-1 and you never showed up with it.
I don't know if we're gonna pay for anything over 1-to-1. That doesn't make sense to me. All of our agreements, our Yellowstone Club agreements, basically a 2-to-1. Why would we go to a 1-to-1 for the canyon? It's great, it's great cause, but why would we negotiate ourselves down from?
Well, let me back up. The value of it is in the financial model already. And I don't know whether that's at a 1.5-to-1 or a 2-to-1 or whatever. My point was get it out of there because none of us can say what it's gonna be. And you're negotiating a financial model now. So get guaranteed 1-to-1. And then anything beyond that,
they could try to sell you. You don't have to buy it.
Generally, I like the simplicity of one-to-one. It's just a canyons pay for your treatment at whatever price you define as worth your money. And you know you can dispose everything they send to you, and you get to control when and how you dispose it, and it might work as an asset, even though it's one-to-one. Then you get to decide whether sending an extra 50 MGY down there is good for Big Sky Water and Sewer District versus your other options. So you get to decide the cost benefit that works for your user rate base. Lots of moving parts, but that's, yeah, and I think we'll have a financial, at least an outline structure of why that does or does not make sense for Big Sky Water and Sewer District. That's the complexity that we're working on.
I just keep getting back to the YC agreement, which has been favorable for both parties, no question. And that was a 2-to-1 ratio, basically, when you take the gallons guaranteed versus, and the storage at 1.5 or 1
There is a value in the financial model currently, right?
Yeah.
And my point is, we don't know how much reuse disposal we're gonna get down there. The canyon's gonna get down there. Nobody does.
Okay.
Nobody's ready to guarantee.
You don't need to go down, I think we all understand what we're talking about, that's all. It's gotta make sense, it's gotta be consistent, that's all.
Okay.
Agreed.
Brian, you mentioned 2250 a couple times. I didn't know what that.
They had, it's 225,000 gallons a day, correct? So if you take the 225,000 divided by, well, we just threw in 100 SFEs.
Yeah.
100 gallons per SFE per day. That they had 1,500 ratepayers or 1,500 services. It came out to 100 gallons a day would put you at 2250 SFEs. So I'm just trying to convert their users or customers to our SFE model. So we can, because we do everything by SFEs.
Okay.
Where did the 1,500 come from?
That was in his
That
model.
was a population equivalent. We were using SFEs, and that's that translation of gallons per day versus population equivalent versus SFEs. To Brian's point, I think 2250 SFEs, track that as kind of that 20-year demand, and the 10-year demand's roughly halfway between.
They gave us two pieces of the formula, and it was 1,500 users, 225,000 gallons per day. I just converted to our SFE model, just to simplify, I put 100 gallons per day.
I was wondering, is 1,500 realistic?
It's our best estimate of roughly 10 years out of what that projection might be. The challenge is we don't have meters like you all do to even get an accurate bearing. But as we look at existing septic permits there, existing populations, existing commercial uses, and then the projected build out of, say, a quarry development and redevelopment of certain spots.
Okay.
That is our best estimate, and all the while tracking that there needs to be a general cap there. It's not going to turn into 4,000 SFEs or whatever that number might be. And that cap we've generally set as water rights is going to generally serve as a development limitation down there. And so we're tracking these variables, but again, it's a loose projection.
Mesa, you're sticking with your 1,500 projected. What is your current users that would grow in the 1,500?
Existing, you're basically wondering existing demand down there?
Yeah.
Users.
Sticking with 1,500 as my metric. My head's actually in gallons per day. We'll say.
Well, we can go with the 2,250 SFEs if you prefer. I
We'll
just want to
say
get an idea of what that is.
ratio, I'll say that 1,500 drops down to about 600 currently. Don't quote me on anything here, but yeah, I feel like there's a.
Why don't you say 500 for 1/3 right now?
Let's go 500. Yeah,
I'm just trying to keep this math.
So projecting it to triple.
Yeah.
So you're,
That's what I was getting at.
the 1,500 are, if we were to do it today, people that would join.
Take about
1,000. 1,000.
If you were to join today, the 500 we just kind of simplified is today. And we're expecting about a 3x increase over a 10 to 20-year projection. It's just how fast is that truly gonna happen? Because you do have developments like the quarry just sitting there of, if the demand's there, they would probably start construction, and that's a rapid user base, not a 5% growth. It's a big chunk that would come online pretty quick.
Just so I'm clear too, that the 1,500, you mentioned a 10, 20-year build out, but the 1,500 would be also the max. Or
No.
continue to grow.
There's a projection beyond the 1,500. The 1,500 was what we were using for our financial model of, we see this immediate demand that you can rely on to be a reliable user rate base. There's another, I can't remember the financial report, but I felt like there was about a 2,000 population equivalent. So a little bit bigger. If we're working 500 chunks, there's another.
So that helps, it's kind of a ballpark. I'm not holding you to the numbers, but it gives a feel.
Yeah, it's me being Nostradamus a little bit of, here's what I think is there. But yeah, there's an error bar there. So.
Which kind of illustrates the importance of the canyon, you know, with having a system. I mean, I hope everybody would support this, given that's our job to make sure that an opportunity like this is implemented with the right conditions. I mean, it's the right thing to do, but if it just blows the top off of growth, you gotta be careful of that as well. It's a fine line.
Yep, agreed.
I did ask for a baseline to say today, based on environmental approvals, what could be built. And so if that number was 1,000, and then you basically the Big Sky Water and Sewer District was bringing another 500 to the table, that should be evaluated. In other words, by going forward with this, if you're increasing the opportunity for density, you got to consider that.
It sounds like, you're saying it is 1,000 currently?
No, it's just saying if there's a delta that this decision increases, if it double density, you got to consider that.
Yeah, so hypothetically, the quarry, for example, is planning on doing septic nets and doing 270 units. If they had central wastewater, would they do 350? What would they do?
What's that increase that's on because of the central sewer system? And that comes up in conversation.
Yeah, be monetized. Okay. Anything else?
Peter. Question, I'm just thinking out loud, when you guys are talking about this model, how far down does this phase go? You know, it's where phase not, but
For the canyon phasing, we're targeting phase 1 going to Bucks Teeth. Phase 2, we're targeting that next Ramsel school. The school is definitely on our radar as kind of a no-brainer. We should figure out how to get there. What's the economics of taking on that extra 2 miles of pipe?
is the economic schedule just phase 1?
Right now, we're running just phase 1.
Yes.
Where'd he go?
Must be a hot topic coming up. Got out of Dodge.
Making sure wastewater infrastructure works. He is trying to make it 4 hours. He's trying to make it a 4-hour meeting. You picked the wrong time to go to the bathroom.
Oh, you're doing your part. Get those flows going.
Said it was ball and flow. All right, what do we at next? Legal. Spanish Peaks.
This will be short and sweet.
Yeah.
The Spanish Peaks annexation agreement still sits with their attorney, and the Cold Smoke annexation, we had a meeting. I got a better understanding of it. I was supposed to produce documents and I haven't. Go ahead, Johnny, make it look prettier than that, because it's not.
So I sent out yesterday, from August, we got motion to move forward with the annexation agreement, which we put together. We had a meeting on, my apologies, I found it on my phone, but I couldn't find it on my computer, but I found it and got it resent back out. So that's what's under review currently. Going back through and updating myself because we got a lot of stuff in the air. We didn't schedule another meeting in the subcommittee because we were directed to bring it to the board, but we need to review. It's still under review on the Spanish Peak side. So if we get it reviewed, we can schedule and get this one done. So that's where Spanish Peak is.
Looking right now for a meeting? It's good for you.
Pretty much anytime.
Great. Why don't we do that sooner rather than later so that we understand what's out there?
Yep.
Then again, we can circulate to the board for the next meeting. I think the most important thing, again, is get this boilerplate going for, I know that the annexation application is a boilerplate, but again, we have to have a checklist then of conditions that apply to each individual property.
So what we're looking at is Susan's draft letter.
No, she's got an agreement.
No, we got you got two things. So you got the ordinance, and then the response letter. So I sent response, we got her response. So it was a refresher on how we got to the draft ordinance. So you have both of those.
Her August letter.
It was sent out September 2nd. Because we met right after that because we had already had the crux of it. So Susan was able to get that put together relatively quick. So it's the draft ordinance with the agreement and stuff. That's where we're at, is the agreement to be able to bring that to the board for the reads and completion of that. So
What stalled us for a while, ironically, was the 107. Remember, but it sounds like the 107 is now within the board's review or negotiation. So it takes one thing off the table.
Yep. Okay. And then for cold smoke, and Susan, I didn't catch what you said on where you were at with that.
I was supposed to draft documents and haven't.
Okay. Guess I'm a little confused on draft documents. What I was looking for today, I think with everything that we've presented, and Susan, to say here in the meeting of whether or not we should be moving forward with the moving into the next phase, which is the annexation agreement. I think we got everything. Staff recommendation is to move that forward.
Johnny, I can't, I guess, well, I didn't know about the change in the 107, but I still haven't come to terms with, and I'm going to put it in writing rather than give you something off the cuff at the board, but it's going to use up all of the rest of the, let's call them the trust SFEs. And, I haven't come quite to term. I haven't gone back over those to make sure I'm comfortable with being able to explain to the board the implications of that. So that's where it's sitting in mine.
Susan, it's a two-pronged approach. You have two things going. I just want to make sure that we can have some progress on what we can today. And that's number one, you have an annexation agreement. And then number two, you have, of course, the reconciling the SFEs for the housing trust. And your recommendation was that we basically embed these topics, whether it's gallons based or SFEs or whatever, into these annexation agreements, which I think is great. But I think we can at least try to move forward with, if they have an annexation application in, a standard, our current standard annexation application in, that would be a step forward. But you said you were putting together the boilerplate list. In other words, what are the conditions that go along with coal smoke? And so that there's just no, it doesn't stall when there's something about water rights or wells or something. Does that kind of make sense, Susan, that we can just kind of consider going down parallel paths with that?
Yep.
Great. Because I think that was a great suggestion. I mean, if we're gonna annex any of these properties, let's take as much ambiguity out of the consideration as possible. And with Spanish Peaks, it's now a little easier with the 107, but you have an 80% ratio that we can consider as a board. With coal smoke, it's probably more the water side of things, talking to you about it.
Yeah, the front part, I want to say the part closer to Riverview is in our water source area. The back part, the southern part of it is not, but it's in transition to be changed, and that's what Julie's working on.
Okay. It just needs, you need to have all this cleaned up before we can get forward. And I'm going to just keep saying the word consistency. So if you're reviewing, where'd Michael go? If you're reviewing Flatiron, he dipped out, and Flatiron has an annexation request. I'm just going to use an example, and you talk about a water tank, or you talk about the water rights. It's a consistent checklist on any of these annexations, even though they may be different requirements because of the agreements that we're obligated to. So let's just make sure that we cover consistency. If it's Boyne annexing in, same thing. So we're gonna have a lot of these coming at us. Let's not get ourselves now.
Yeah, and we had a good meeting last Friday. I got to talk to Chris, right? That's his name, Chris. Chris. So one of the things that the district is focusing on is getting at the beginning of the table in these development talks and stuff. So we had a lot of infrastructure conversation and looking at, you know, what they were looking at versus what we're looking at, and making sure we're all on the same page and stuff. So Chris is sending some information over so we can run some stuff through our model, which doesn't account for that area. So we've got to get it in to our water model so we can look at those additions and stuff, because this is down in the valley, it's across the river. It's got mountains on the other side, and just making sure we have all that criteria. So they're not wasting a lot of time and effort in infrastructure development, and then we come in at a later date and review it and say, oh, got to consider this, this, and this. So getting at the head of the table helps make sure we're both going in the same direction, and we're not catching stuff later after they've done a ton of work. So
I think it'd be good to sit down, and we even talk about a retreat to talk about, just to understand this and what our position is in all these things. But it might be good to sit down and lay out all the documents for gallons for flow-based agreement, which there are 4, including West Fork, the Town Center, Spanish Peaks, Flatiron. Lay those out, say what are the general conditions we want to include in every one. We have a boilerplate, you create a document for the board to approve, and then you are ahead of it. So if someone walks in, or the next round of housing trust walks in, and you go, okay, let's go through the checklist. Where is it? Does it apply to this? And it's a flow chart. So you do it on the flow base, you do it on the annexation, and then you have that consistency. I know that for Boyne, I've worked on a water tank agreement for, I don't know, it's been 10, 12 years. Back when I started it, no longer with Boyne, but it's still hanging out there. Let's figure out how this works when the district comes in. Just as a reminder, you can't, once you're annexed, you can't drill wells, right? So let's just make sure everybody understands it, right?
Can I make a request? Just, with cold smoke, there are details to hammer out in a annexation agreement. In terms of timing, we're up against a very tight timeline with a bond essentially going to vote in May. That means a February finalization of the ballot. That's 3 months, so that's a tight timeline to get an ordinance passed. Can I make a request to at least ask to move forward with that ordinance while we're hammering out all the details and making sure that that consistency happens, like during the next 2 months? Just because we're up against a tight timeline, and we submitted this 5 months ago.
I don't think it'll be an ordinance at this point. I mean, right now, you could iron these things out in the next 2 weeks in my mind. You just need to sit down, you know, it needs, of course, we got Spanish Peaks priority, you got Flatiron priority, you got you priority. But yeah, I don't see this as something that's 3 months. I see it as, it's just, and I think I've communicated this all the way along. Once we had that legal opinion from Susan that, yes, you need to have conditions with each one, I think you can iron these out in a pretty short period of time before the next meeting if it's, with John.
Ideally, by our December 5th meeting, you'd have these ironed out. In all reality, I mean, part of what I'm sitting here is conceptualizing in my mind is, I heard you had a doubling of staff, your operating costs have gone up. I would imagine housing plays a critical role in the overall scheme of how your operation works and for your own employees to be able to live in this community. And David here is working on a project that, if through public subsidy, we're able to make happen, you can attain a livable Big Sky today with a $500,000 unit, but it doesn't happen if we don't get this project in the ground. So there's an incentive also for the water and sewer district in this whole thing, and the fact that the challenges you're facing against the cost of living are a direct result of the housing prices in this community. And I'm hoping that through this project, we can actually find some level of an agreement where all the public services are somehow in some form or fashion given an allocation, or at least a first prioritization of these projects. We're engaged with the sheriffs. Every service that we have, public service within this community, is faced with the same challenge: housing. This project is, there is no silver bullet, but if there was one, this is damn near close to it. And it only happens through this public subsidy, and the timing is, to Kreider's point, we're starting to push up against a wall here. And like I said earlier, when we worked on the last 1%, we started in November and we were able to make it happen and get it done. We need to put that same fire behind both the water and sewer projects that we're working on through the CIP and the cold smoke project. So just want to reiterate that, like, ideally it's probably December 5th, where our board is actually going to be taking a vote, likely to make a decision and move forward with a resolution, draft resolution in January, take some public feedback on that and move it to a vote in February. So timing is certainly of the essence here. I just want to put a finer point on what we're discussing, because it's not, these are not just pie in the sky dreams. These are a legitimate plan that David has been working on for quite some time to really provide affordable housing. And we're trying to pull every tool in the toolkit to be able to do this. I'm going up tomorrow with my buddy Mace here to talk to our commission about Ted Tip. By the way, the same conversation that he's having about Ted Tip, cold smoke needs some level of additional support. And we're really up against the gap here financially, but timing is of the essence of some of these kind of regulatory decisions. So I would urge you to get this thing.
Well, let me interject, because you just said it, regulatory. I'm up against regulatory stuff that I've got to get in place before. So, you know, having support for this, the stuff I've got to go through is going to go past the deadline you just said. So, you know, it's all stuff I've been working on and gathering and stuff. I've got a portion of this that's out of my water source area. I've got to work with Julie and stuff. We're cleaning up those water rights, which we started. So I've got a lot more balls in the air than just this annexation agreement to make sure I've got all my regulatory and legal obligations crossed. So that's where I'm looking for as we negotiate this. I don't think it's affecting the bond, because we have the SFE obligation from the interlocal agreement with the housing trust. We know what it's for, but there's other things on the other end that I've got to go through that take time to do that. And I can't rush that. Well, just to do the water source capacity, we've started the pre-application for that. And from that start date, it takes 18 months to get that done. So I have to have that process going to change our water source mapping. That part of cold smoke is not even in that water source area. So, you know, there's things that we're correcting and cleaning up internally that, you know, is as long as we're doing it, we can proceed with this other stuff. So I've got to have that stuff in place
In order for the board to take a vote on the annex. Is that?
Well, no, I think we're talking two different things. No, and I hear you. Johnny, thank you for bringing that in. What level of assurance that do you need? I mean, you need to pass the annexation.
We need to ensure that entitlements are under, I mean, it's the same thing as when Riverview was happening and there was a variation that needed to come from the county relative to the right.
And we pushed that through. I'll tell you, that was record time.
Yeah.
I promise you. And it was So last split board decision too that I remember.
Yeah, I think some assurance that like this isn't gonna just stall the same way that we've been kind of stalling on the 12 million with Canyon District and we'll proceed. So whatever that looks like from the board's perspective, like it's kind of up to you all to determine, but.
Well, look, I said, there's no reason not to speak for your time, but there's no reason why these items can't, we can't come to an agreement with these items in 2 weeks, I think, on some of these things. I just want to make sure there's no ambiguity out there when I talk about the conditions.
Yeah.
So what level, I mean, are you saying that for December 5th, which of course, that's not in the timeline with our next board meeting?
Yeah.
You know, tell us specifically what is required for your board. And then we'll see if we can work through it.
I'll bring that to you and let's see what we can hammer out.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I want to go, Johnny has been putting together this list and I think he's got a lot of balls in the air, man.
Yeah.
He just does.
I appreciate
And I feel for him.
Yeah.
So I think we sit down and we say, what level of assurance do you need? Not to speak for the board, but what level? I mean, if you went through a conditional list and said, all water rights, all this, it can tie in here. Water tank, I can tell you, is going to be a tough one just because we got it on the Flatiron, we got it on Boyne, potential annexation, we got it on this. So these are things that you're gonna have to.
We most certainly need to shore up the numbers, because I think the current model assumes that there's an annexation into the district, and I would assume that there's probably some other plan that would go underway relative to the financial package that was being pulled together for the project as a whole in the event that it's not annexed into the water and sewer district. Because what we're going to the voters for is basically a ballot to take on debt. And so we need to ensure that we've got the right dollar amounts. A good point in case is, you know, $12 million was the original dollar amount for the Canyon District, and now look what's happened with that. So that's the level of assurance I think more than anything looking for, Brian, is just, is this project sound and how much do the numbers shift around in the event that this doesn't happen? But it sounds like we can probably hammer that out in the next 2 weeks, is what I mean.
Oh, it's a board deal. We got Susan, any other feedback on it? We hear you. I didn't quite get the December 5th as being a part, but.
There's probably like a January date that we could push. I mean, we're starting to get to a point where these are getting brought to the board now for some level of decision. And February 20th is the final deadline to get anything to the voters or the elections office. Like that's the hard stop. Backing up from that, there's a resolution that needs to happen between now and then some board discussion relative to the overall proposals that are on the table from everyone.
And specifically from my standpoint, was thinking about the idea of at least you have these hurdles, right? You have to move forward and hopefully vote to not send it out to ratepayers. You need to then have at least 2 readings for an ordinance, right? And that's a minimum of 3 months. So we were just backing into November, December, January, and hoping to like at least have it annexed, conditioned upon all the annexation agreement, like caveats, right, by January, February. That was sort of the goal. And that was why today was so important. We were thinking that November, December, January, and you know, if you push to next month, then regulatory, you got to push to February. And that was sort of where my timeline came from.
Understood. Again, it's why we're here and board. Johnny, we won't speak for you. You need 30 hours in a day right now, I know. But how do we, what's a response?
I think we need the conditions from Danny. What they're looking for before we can react to them.
Yeah, I'll get those to you before I'm not trying to be a stick in the mud. We're just like, we've been working at this now for about 1.5 years, and it's like, okay, we're starting to come to a head here. And backing up from if we move something to the ballot in May, like there's some hard deadlines that we just need to stick to. So I'll get the conditions, whatever that may be. I don't know in writing what that looks like. I guess more than anything, we want to be assured that David's request of the SFE use is folding into a property that is going to be serviced.
I'm imagining you probably need something similar to what we did for the canyon on the feasibility. You know, we said it was feasible and we're gonna move this forward.
I think it's probably Riverview might be a little better model to work from. And just again, looking at the interlocal agreement, it has to be in the district. So the annexation's a requirement, I get it. So it's just-
Excuse me, in order to like move this forward, we've heard everybody's positions. Johnny, why don't you email me when meeting is over and we'll set up a couple of meeting times to get the documents starting to flow. Does that work?
Yeah, I'll be in town. I'll be down in the valley Friday if you got some time.
I'll
Right.
make time.
Okay.
Okay.
And by documents, are we talking about a draft annexation agreement, or are we talking about what items need to be addressed in that?
Is that Al?
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, because I can't see you people and I am only guessing at voices, so it's, you know, this is not exactly ideal from a listener participation. Johnny and I need to work through that. What my concept would be is, yeah, we'll give you a draft ordinance, we'll give you the letter like I gave you about the things you need to consider, what you know and what you don't know, and we would give you some type of a draft agreement that we will have circulated to Cold Smoke so that we say, here are the things they need to agree upon. Even if we annex them, we're not providing them service until all of these things are accomplished. Clear enough?
That helps. Thank you. That's Al, by the way.
This is Brian, by the way. That was a good summary of where we need to go. And I think, look, we hear you, Dan. Bottom line, I got it. You'll, I guess I'd open the door. Go ahead, Dick.
Brian, or Dan, what's the ballot issue? What's it going to ask people to vote on?
We're probably gonna have three still in discussion as we're learning more about these projects. I mean, I think we have two active ones that we're talking about here that are still kind of swirling around, and hopefully we can get those nailed down, but I think we're looking at 3 ballot measures, well, actually 4. One, as I think everyone's aware, we had an appointment for Steve Johnson's position on the board. That'll be on the ballot no matter what, for an affirmation of Michelle Konjorsky on our board. 2, we're pursuing an extension of the resort tax district for a variety of reasons. 1, I don't think anyone would like to see that sunset because it would go away. And we're looking at adding an additional 30 years onto that. And as a result of that, it increases our overall bonding capacity and our borrowing capacity, both on the 3% and the 1%, which are 2 different math problems, 2 different capacities. So you'd have a ballot measure for 3% projects that would be pursuing financing through a bond likely, and or collaborating with other entities like Canyon District for SRF loans, and then a 1% for infrastructure fund as well. So kind of 4 ballot measures would be likely on the ballot in May. We're still sorting that through, and that's what we're trying to decide in December. So, you know, we're pushing up against a few months of the deadline here, but we may lose an opportunity if we.
And what you're saying is that the Cold Smoke would be one of those projects that you're asking for approval?
Yeah, for anyone who's interested, resorttax.org, go watch our last board meeting. It actually was pretty insightful as to the conversation that's going on, but there's like, I think 7 or 8 projects right now that are under consideration, in addition to the Mid-Mountain Booster Station, WRF Phase 2, the Canyon District, Cold Smoke. There was a childcare facility that's since been removed. There's about 7 or 8 projects that are currently under consideration. The SEO has 3 that have been submitted. Booster. I think Booster's gone. Yeah. Just want to make sure you didn't, point in case, active conversation. We just removed a project. That's why we're here. That's money. So, yeah, that's the big picture. Yeah. So, I mean, back to it. Anything else, Dick?
No, thank you.
Guys, Al? Okay, Susan gave us a path. I think the key is let's track this just like we have in the last few weeks on Canyon discussion. Made a lot of progress, I think, on just understanding. Not to throw it on your plate or detour you from things that are severe deadlines, but let's see if we can come up with a way to get some communication back and forth. And I think the number one thing is to see if we can achieve a comfort level from this board, the resort tax board. Yes, that's where we're going with this. Yeah, that's right. No one's trying to stall it. It's unique. Spanish Peaks has been on this one for 9 months, and then I don't know if you heard earlier, and all of a sudden, no, it's not 107. Well, the 107 has been beating our fist. That's the nature of the beast.
I hear you. I just wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't create a some
Understood.
level of sense of urgency around like, we're on like a political deadline for the elections office is the main thing that.
And we all, I want to make sure you understand, we all understand the importance of workforce housing.
Yeah.
And the affordability of it. We all understand that, so, we'll figure this out.
Cool.
So I don't want to speak for everybody, we're gonna figure out a way to hopefully, work towards, a solution.
I just want to make clear that I understand what you guys are bringing to the table, but I've got a list of things that come with that too. So
Understand.
I don't want to double my efforts and work on places.
No, it's just more lining that up with what needs to happen in order, right? What can be conditional, what needs to happen.
I'm learning every day.
Right, just to move things forward, right? And I know that you're moving forward, appreciate it, we talk a lot, but just want to see what can be done at the board level, what needs to happen at board meetings in order to stay on time. I don't want that we.
Well, unfortunately, it falls on me. They can't do anything unless I got the appropriate work to bring to them, so.
And also bond council into the conversation as well, in addition to the board, like bond council will most certainly need to advise on. I mean, this bonds right now, by the way, everyone, are 4-letter word. I don't know if you looked at the ballot the last time, bonds came on there wasn't a single bond that passed, on Galvin County's ballot in this last election. And what we're pushing for here is not necessarily just a bond, it's a vision for our community's future. In all reality, I mean, I find it fascinating listening to these meetings, and if you went to any other water and sewer district, you would be talking about water and wastewater, but you all have a third leg to the stool, which is disposal, and it's kind of exciting for me to hear about a vision where you're talking about water and disposal moving forward, because wastewater has basically been taken care of in perpetuity. What we were discussing earlier today were to come to fruition. That's fascinating to me, and I think the disposal stuff is.
No, we all have the same vision, so it's great, and let's see if we can move forward. Again, I'm not gonna put you or anyone under it, but let's see if we can keep the communication going. Got a holiday next week, you always hate to hear that, and then you go right into some of these deadline, goals. Let's just see if we can keep communication going. Great. All right. New developments.
So there's submitted in terms of slowed way down. So a new house and a new condo. So permitted.
I can't believe some of the data over the last year. It is amazing. Let's recap. Flows are too low. That it's turning off the plant. They're trickling in. They have been for months.
Well, we're up over last year. I'll say that.
That was really trickling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The last few years were slow, but
It's unbelievable.
I've permitted more this year than the last 2 years, so.
And then the number of customers since what year?
2004 to 2024, 3,200 to 4,100.
It's a challenge in the financial model.
Mhm.
You're sitting here on paper obligation, but you're not getting that customer base. You're getting the $45 to $50 per quarter on a vacant lot. It's very interesting how that model's working.
We'll get there.
And it's funny, we squeeze down the water use, but then you don't get the water use when you start going up higher. So
Right.
it's like point of diminishing returns on the dollar volume of water in our budget.
Yeah, I was working through the numbers on the water usage and the sewer usage last year, and it was down. The numbers are down. So usage, billed usage.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yep, you raise the rates, the usage numbers go down, make it.
But listening to resort tax the other day, collections were up. And which I always say, as Taylor used to say, the gross domestic product for Big Sky. He loved that term. But when I heard that the other day, I said, why do we have a correlation with what we're doing? Ionize and things like that. You guys, staff, you're just doing too good a job. Maybe look the other way.
Stop.
Yeah, yeah, slow down a little, man. So, okay, what else?
That's all we got. Next meeting is December 17th. It's kind of a big one. That's Ron's last one. We'll have our internal, you should see the invites, that Lindsay has pushed out. So
Johnny goes to the Philippines the
And
next
then
time.
I go to the Philippines.
He's gonna have his bag packed in the car when he comes in. Okay, anything else from the board? Good. No. I think Jerry got it off on his calendar, because I just was talking to him about today, and we're talking about all the things we're gonna discuss. So, all right, motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor? Oh, that's that one.
Find that picture?
No, I'm gonna find it right now.